Want to create a dynamic infinite transformation sequence in Photoshop? What am I talking about? Take this, power duplicate it to create an infinite sequence. Now make changes to any one of them and the entire sequence updates automatically. And we're going to start with this composition right here, multi-layered composition as you can see. And we're going to turn it into this so that each and every one of these true clones, that's what I'm calling them, is linked to an original, and if you make any change to any one of them, all of them will update. How in the world do you pull that off? Well, the first thing I need to show you is how to create a transformation sequence in Photoshop, just in case you don't know. And so I'm going to click and hold on the shape tool and select the polygon tool because that's how you draw stars. I want to demonstrate with the star. And I'll click on this little gear icon and I change the star ratio to 47%. That way we have an even 5-pointed star is how we're going to start off. My foreground color is white so that if I draw a star like so, it's going to appear white. I'm using the space bar to move it around to a better location here, and I'll press the shift key to constrain my star so it's not all squished. It's nice and proportional. And then we get a star, and now what you want to do, then notice, I want to explain the background here because it's awfully twisted if you don't know about it. You go to the edit menu, right, and you choose free transform path. Don't do that. That's not what we're going to do. I just want you to notice that we've got a keyboard shortcut of Control-T, Command-T on the Mac. And what that allows you to do is rotate or scale or move or, you know, all kinds of stuff you can do to the object when you choose this command. However, if you add the Alt or Option key, then you create a duplicate. So Control-Alt-T, Command-Option-T on the Mac. And let me show you what that looks like. I'll press Control-Alt-T, Command-Option-T on the Mac. Doesn't look like we've created a duplicate. It just looks like we have a transformation boundary. But notice if I drag it over here, we've got two stars here. So I duplicated the star. Now I'm going to rotate it. I could go ahead and scale it as well. Let's put it right about here. See if that ends up working. And so I've moved, and I've scaled, and I've rotated it. So 3 different transformations, right? And I'll press the Enter key in order to accept that change. Now, I'll add the Shift key to that keyboard shortcut. So in other words, Control-Shift-Alt-T. So all the modifier keys down, Command-Shift-Option-T on the Mac. This is what I call a mash your fist. Just all the, mash your fist T in other words, all the modifier keys down. And you create a transformation sequence. Isn't that just the most beautiful thing you ever saw here inside Photoshop? All right, I don't want a bunch of stars. So yeah, they're all on the same polygon layer right here. Notice that. So I'll just get rid of them by pressing backspace key and they go away. Isn't that nice? Well, what I want to do now is I want to create a duplicate of all these layers that go. Notice there's this iPad layer right here. If I turn it off, then you can see that all these other layers are clipped inside of it, and that reveals these hexagons that I created in the background using Generative Fill. In case you're curious, hexagon, black and blue wallpaper, futuristic. You know, I've been hearing from people like the thing about Generative Fill is it's not very predictable. And that's true, but every once in a while you land on some great prompt that will give you a pretty great result every single time. But anyway, there's one. Try it out. But I'm going to turn the iPad back on. What I want to do is select the iPad and shift click on the text so that all those layers are selected. And I just want to put them together. Because otherwise I got these, 5 different layers that I'm going to have to duplicate and wrangle, and that's going to become kind of a mess really quickly. So I'm going to group them, right, by pressing Control-G, Command-G on the Mac. That's all there is to it. And it puts them all inside of a folder as we're seeing right here. I'll rename that folder. I'll call it iPad because that's what it is, I gather. And now what you want to do is that same thing, right? Start off with the Control-Alt-T, Command-Option-T on the Mac, and then switch, and then do your first transformation, and then repeat the transformation over and over again by adding the Shift key. All right, so I'll press Control-Alt-T, Command-Option-T on the Mac, and I'll just go ahead and scale this guy. And notice we don't, if I press the Enter key, we just have one. It ignored the fact I have the Alt or Option key down. And that's Photoshop for you. This is a bug, Adobe. This needs to be fixed. And it's just a function of the fact I'm working with a group. When you're working with multiple objects, it gets goofed up. And so if I had multiple loose objects, it'd be okay. But then, of course, I'd have multiple loose objects, and that would be a mess very, very quickly. So here's what you have to do. Just trust me. You got to press Control-J. Command-J on the Mac. Why am I doing that? To jump a copy of my iPad. And then what you want to do is you go to the layer menu right there and you choose Merge Group. That's a Control-E. Command-E on the Mac. So if you can remember those two things, actually it's 3 things, right? it's a G, and then it's a J, and then it's an E. And notice when I press Control E or choose that command, I get a merged version of that group. And I'm just going to call this merged so we can keep track of how it's a different thing. Now, I'll zoom out just a little bit, and I'll press that same keyboard shortcut of Control Alt T, Command Option T on the Mac. And then I will transform this guy, and notice it works. It works beautifully. And we have two copies now because I went and merged them together. What a pain in the neck, don't you think? Anyway, let's get this exactly right where I want it to be. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the W value here. Notice W and H are linked together up here in the options bar. That's width and height. I'm going to change it to 62%. And then I want to drag this guy down a little bit, but I kind of want to do it by the numbers. I want to make sure I'm creating an effect that's going to look good. And so notice the delta, the triangle right here is turned on, which means I can make relative modifications. So I'm going to change the X value. These are coordinate changes to 400. So I'm moving the tablet, the iPad over to the right 400 pixels, and then I'll change the Y value to negative 190. So I'm moving it down 190 pixels. I'm actually that's a big lie. I'm moving it up 190 pixels. Notice that's down at 0. So negative 190 moves it up. So negative values up, positive values down. Where the Y value is concerned. Anyway, I'll just press the enter key a couple times, and now I've made a duplicate. And now if I press Control Shift Alt T, thank you very much, Command Shift Option T on the Mac, Master Fist T in any case, you're going to create a bunch of duplicates of that iPad. Problem is, of course, there's no dynamic link between these guys. They're just static layers, as you can see over here. And so if I twirl open my original iPad and I grab me, I got two layers for me because I'm masked against the background so that I could give myself a little more hair. I know. It's cool. It's a comb over of sorts. And I'm going to go, I just wanted it to be all wavy, blowing to the left there. And I'm going to drag those guys over like so, but nothing happened. Why didn't nothing happen? And that's because that merge layer right there is covering things up. If I turn the merge layer off, I'll go ahead and turn it off and try again to drag those guys over. I got the wrong tool selected. I got the polygon tool. I'm going to switch to the move tool right there. It's still the same thing. If I don't turn off merge, notice I'll drag me and it doesn't work. And then if I turn off merge and drag me, it does work. However, it only works for that one iPad. The others don't update in kind. That's because there's no dynamic link. Now, some of you are already seeing what's coming, and its name is Smart Object. Real quick, do you want to take those infinite iPads and turn them into a kind of portrait inside a portrait effect, complete with fancy frames and a posh new jacket? Well, then join my Patreon, which is patreon.com/geeknow. And now, back to that dynamic transformation sequence inside Photoshop. And so what I'm going to do is back up. Actually, I'm going to way back up. I'll go to the File menu and choose Revert just to start again, don't you know? And that way we haven't, the waters are not tainted. This is where we started. And so what I'm going to do is click on the text, shift click on iPad so they're all together. And instead of putting them in a group, what you do is you have to switch tools. I can't have the move tool selected because if I right click, it just wants to take me to a different layer. You have to press the M key to switch to the rectangular marquee tool, which is the default tool in Photoshop. So it's an easy thing to do. And then right click. And the great thing about working with the rectangular marquee tool is when you right click, you get all the goodness in Photoshop, like convert to smart object. So that it's going to put them all in a single smart object here. And I'll just go ahead and call this guy iPad. All right, now the problem is that Control-Alt-T doesn't work any better on a smart objects. Control-Alt-T, Command-Option-T on the Mac, and go ahead and scale it and press the Enter key, and it doesn't work. It ignored the Alt or Option key. Darn you, Photoshop. You would save the world. A lot of time, if you would fix that obvious bug, it just shouldn't, that's why. Why would you not, why wouldn't it work on a smart object? So, make a copy. So Control J, Command J on the Mac again. Turn off the original iPad. Just turn it off for a moment. Just trust me. Right click inside the image window and choose this guy, rasterize smart object. So we're back to just pixels. One layer pixels. Photoshop doesn't get so confused. Go ahead and choose that. Control Alt T, Command Option T on a Mac. And this time I'm going to get a clone, just like I want, right? I'm going to get a copy. Let's go ahead and enter those values. So the delta is still turned on. So I'll select the X value, change it to 400, tab to the Y value, change it to -190. See, once you have the numbers, it's easy to repeat things, and change the W value to 62. Height is linked, so they both change in kind, and as a result, we get that same transformation. And now if I press Control Alt T or Command Option T on the Mac, then I create a sequence. Problem is, bunch of static layers because I jumped this guy, right? Because I created a copy of it and then I rasterized it. That was actually the thing. When I rasterized it, that was when we arrived at static pixels. And so if I were to make any change to the iPad layer to the smart object, you can tell it's a smart object because if you hover over it, it says it's a smart object and it's got a little page icon which shows you that all those layers are embedded inside this larger composition. They're protected as well, and you can duplicate them, and they'll remain true clones. Anyway, you got to get rid of all this garbage. It's not, it doesn't want to be there because it's all static. And then I'll turn this back on. You may say, Deke, why did you do that? You just lost all the stuff you created. What did I just do? What did I just do? Ask Photoshop. Ask Photoshop what I just did. Buggy old Photoshop. What I did was I taught it. I taught it the transformation I want. And now, for some reason, with the smart object selected, I couldn't press Control Alt T, but I can press Control Shift Alt T, Command Shift Option T on the Mac in order to create a bunch of duplicates, as many as I like. And notice that they're all smart objects, so they're true clones of the original. Now, what you do is you edit any one of them. They're all linked to the same thing. So I'll just start with the base iPad as opposed to iPad. I could do any of them though. All you do is double click on one of these guys. Now, what do I want to do? What kind of change do I want to make? Well, for one thing, that's the final, just so you can see it again. For one thing, I don't want these iPads on my face. I want to scoop my face over. So I'm going to go ahead and select switch back to this guy, who is the open version of the smart object right now. This is saved. Notice it's a .psb file. This is saved as a separate temporary file. It's squirreled away in some kind of folder. Photoshop knows where it is. That's all that counts. But it's linked to what you're doing. So I'm going to grab both me and the screen below. It's a masking trick right there, but I need both these layers to pull it off. And now what I'm going to do is move me over. Now I figured out that I could just grab my move tool here and I could just drag it over like so, but I know how far I want it to move. Actually, could I see how far? Look at that. I want to move it. I'm going to just do it by dragging. I want to move it over to the left. Do you see the heads-up display? 110 pixels. That's what I want. I just happen to know that works because I've been through it. Why waste your time? And I didn't move it vertically at all. It's just a horizontal move. And now what you do is you go up to the File menu and choose the Save command. Now, normally that updates the file on disk. When you're working with a smart object, that updates the file that you're working on, that composition. So it doesn't really save to disk. It saves, it basically updates at this point. And updates, not that one. That's quit going there, Deke. It updates this one. So that I'll show you. Undo. See how I'm underneath the iPads? Redo. I'm now clear of the iPads, which means I can now, on my happy and merry way, I can make any other changes I want. But you may notice a problem here. You may say, Deke, do you really want the iPad? Wait a sec. When you showed us this, the iPad, no, that was messed up too. I didn't fix that problem. All right, well, I will. Don't you worry about it. What's the problem? The problem is that my shoulder is getting covered by the iPad, and I want each shoulder to appear in front of each one, which means I'm going to need a mask, which means, by the way, let's get rid of these guys because they're not masked. And if I were to like try to create a mask and then duplicate the mask and scale it at the same time and move it over and all that jazz, it's not impossible, but it's more than I want to handle in this video. So I'll just get rid of all those. Just create one. Keep the one copy. Photoshop still remembers, as long as you don't apply a different transformation, it still remembers that last transformation. Isn't that handy? Yeah, Photoshop. It's not just a big old buggy program. It does some things really, really well. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here now. There's a couple of ways I could work. Actually, I want to show you the fancy way. But one way is just to select the shoulder, and I would probably do that using the object selection tool. I'd marquee my shoulder, but obviously I've already selected my shoulder, right? It's right there. There's the mask right there. You can see it. I'll click on it for a second. That has got this nicely defined shoulder right here. And I think this shoulder is even better. They're the same probably. Let's go with this guy. And what you want to do is just go ahead and load it up as a selection outline by pressing the control key or the command key on a Mac. Do you see my cursor? It's changed to a little pointy thing, pointy finger, click, and you've loaded that selection outline. Now you want to move it into the composition that we're working on, which is this guy right here. Why don't I just go away? You're in. I keep switching to you and it's just confusing, so I'll close that one. And now I'll switch to the marquee tool. Because what the marquee tool does, besides give you the best shortcut menu ever, it also allows you to move the selection outline independently of the image, which is great. And now you want to drag it up here to the title tab, let it switch, and then drop it into place like so. Now you've got that selection outline inside this image. And let's turn off the iPad copy layer for a moment. And let's move this guy so it looks like it is in the right position. And I'm using the arrow keys just to kind of nudge it until it looks like it's right where it wants to be, which I think is right about there, let's say. And zoom out just to make sure, yeah, it looks like it's aligned elsewhere. I mean, my hair, my fake hair there is, not going to look like it's aligned. That doesn't matter. Anyway, click on this guy, turn on iPad copy, make sure it's selected. Don't click on this, on the add layer icon, because if you add layer mask, because if you click on that, it's because it mask it inside the shoulder. That's not what you want. Undo that. Press the Alt key, of course, or the Option key on the Mac to reverse the behavior and click on Add Layer Mask. And it puts my shoulder in front. And now what you do is you make sure that the layer mask and the layer are linked together. See that little link there? It's got to be there. And now you press Mash Your Fist T. And it goes ahead and it duplicates both of them, does it not? Is that not just wild that it's capable of doing that? All right, now I'm looking at this and going, okay, couple of problems. Like the text is getting too covered up, and I shouldn't this be a question mark? Is there life on other tablets? Shouldn't there be a question mark there? And then I kind of want to make it more kind of astral and stuff. Well, this guy's still linked, by the way, this guy right here. And so, and if you have any concerns about that, like if the link is, because sometimes you can do something and the link breaks, the link to the smart object that you have open. If you have any concerns about that, just close it and say no, or don't save on the Mac, just to clear it. And then double click on one of these guys. I'll just double click on iPad once again. You could double click on any of them in order to just make sure we've got a link going. And what I decided to do was a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to go ahead and click on this thousands. Notice this is something I created, by the way, with Generative Fill. It's abstract smoke trails. It's called thousands. I started off with a different thing. Let's just call it abstract. Why don't we? So I'm not confused by that, because I'm so easily confused. Turn these off for a moment just so we can focus on this. And what I want to do is add a kind of, well, first of all, I want to color it. I want to give it a different color. So I'm going to twirl this open right here. Notice this FX, it's the color overlay right there. So this is what Generative Fill came up with, and then I colorized it using color overlay. I'll double click on it so you can see I just set the color to yellow, and then I set the blend mode to multiply. But now I want to change it to purple. And so if I clicked on this color here and I changed this guy to roughly purple, let's say, and clicked OK, that's not going to make it purple because we're multiplying. But I want to keep that I want to keep that yellow in place. Oh, I can't just undo that, I guess. All right, so I'll just change it back to 60, which is where it was. And instead, I'm going to add another color overlay by clicking on this plus icon right here. And then make sure the top one's selected. You got two color overlays. You want this top guy to be selected. Click on it. Change it. Once again, I'm going to change it. What I decide, I think I actually came up with 250 degrees, which is a deep shade of blue. And then I changed the blend mode to color. And you end up with this effect here. And I left the opacity set to 100%. All right, so this is without that newest color overlay. This is with, just to give you a sense. If that's not quite, you know what? Let's make it a little bit more purple. Notice that I can raise that hue value to make it more purple. That's pretty cool, huh? Click OK a couple of times is what I was trying to say. And now I want to add some stars. There's all kinds of star making effects that you can apply inside Photoshop, but I really want to take advantage of generative fill just because it's so much easier to work that way these days. All right, now I don't want to replace this existing generative fill layer. I don't want to change it out with something else. So I want to create a new layer, but this is kind of like here, I'll click on a text layer and it's still gonna menace this layer somehow, or it's not. Okay, great, but now it's just giving me, notice the context sensitive taskbar thing is no longer it's giving me text stuff. It's no longer giving me that generative fill button, and I don't think it's going to if I switch to here. No, it's not. So what you need to do, if you can't get the generative fill button to come up, is what I'm telling you, just make a new layer. Make it. I'm going to put it up here on top, and I'm just going to press Control-Shift-N, Command-Shift-N on the Mac, because that's the easiest way to create a new layer inside here. And this is just I'll call it bogus because I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm going to get rid of it. It's just there, but so that I can now press Control-A, Command-A on the Mac, so I can fill up the entire image, and now I'll see generative fill. And I'll click on it, and I'll say, let's say I want some distant. I am the world's worst typist. Never went to typing class ever, so galaxies. But I did write, nearly 100 books, so didn't really completely destroy my ability to write. Anyway, distant galaxies, just like to mention that. If you're a typing teacher, I'm sorry. Typing's very important. All right, so anyway, I am now generating a layer of distant galaxies. You can see it will be distant galaxies. It's showing up in the properties panel already. So it's trying to give me something to start with. And then you just go, which one do I like the best? And, I don't love any of these. But let's say, hey, you know what? Let's say I'm gonna wing it. I'm just gonna say that's okay. I don't want this layer mask, so I'll get rid of it. And I'm gonna drag this guy down here so he's part of the clipping group. Pretty cool, actually. And now I'll just change the blend mode to screen, so it kind of blends in with all the other stuff that's going on. Or I could change it. Is overlay going to work better? Overlay might be cooler. You can play with the blend mode all you want. Oh, no, not hard light. Not going to do that. Let's go with. I mean, this isn't really an aesthetic video, by the way. I'm just doing stuff so you can see that cool stuff can happen. And I'll just go ahead and save that change. I'll just press Control-S, Command-S on the Mac. Go back here, and it all updated. They all updated. This was before, by the way, and this is after. Now, if you do go ahead and accept and undo, you break the link to the smart object that you have open. So you'd have to redo in order to keep that link active. Okay, now I want to add a question mark, but I also want to take is there life on other tablets and kind of move it away from my shoulder. So what I'm going to do is switch to that type layer, and I'm going to, is there something above the type layer currently? It's acting like there's the bogus layer. Let's get rid of that. We don't need that layer anymore. It didn't go away because I think I still have a selection outline going. Do I? No, because it wasn't really. Oh, no. I got rid of it. Okay, well, Photoshop's being a little sluggish here because of this text layer, I gather. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump a copy of it. And the reason is I want to slant it. And Photoshop doesn't really keep track of slanting stuff. And so you might want to have your original text layer just sitting around just in case. Does that make sense? Anyway, it's up to you. You can just, barrel in there and just start making changes. But I am going to switch to the type tool, and I'm going to click here. See how it's sluggish? Things are sluggish. And I'll enter a question mark because, I need that. And then look at, I think this is why things are a little sluggish for me, is because I'm using a variable concept font, which means I could bolster the weight and take the width down, because this is the kind of font that you can vary the width and the weight on the fly. numerically, because it's basically interpolating between a bunch of different objects here, a bunch of different versions of the text. I'm sorry, of the font. And I'm going to change the kerning right here to metrics, and now press Control T, Command T on the Mac. We're not doing a transformation sequence this time. This is just free transform. So just Control or Command T. But what you can do now at this point, you should be able to press the Control key or the Command key on the Mac. And notice that gives me the ability with the Control or Command key down to do a little bit of a kind of slant. And I don't want too much slant, so notice my vertical value right there. I'm going to change it to 3 degrees right here, so I just have a little bit of a slant. And then I'll press the Control key or Command key and drag this way in order to back slant it. And notice my V value went away. That's what I was telling you. Photoshop is not very good about keeping track. Well, not very good. It's not good at all. It's terrible at keeping track of its skew values. And so, another distortion values that it applies. And so that's why I kept that original, just in case I want to come back to it. But anyway, in case I wanted to start with no slant, in other words. Anyway, this looks pretty good. I think I think I'll accept this. I think I'll just go ahead and press the Enter key a couple of times in order to accept that change. And then let me just check. I just want to see if I'm close enough. I think if I bring this text up toward my hand, it's going to be free and clear of my shoulder. That's what I'm looking for. And that looks pretty. Let's give it a try. Why don't I just press Control S, Command S on the Mac, to just see if I've done it or not, and then I'll go back and look at my larger composition. I just barely cleared my shoulder, and so that is a wonderful thing. And so what I recommend you do, having done this, of course, is just go ahead and close that smart object, the original, with all the layers and everything, just so you don't accidentally goof it up and break the link and all that stuff. And we now have, as you can see here, a sequence of these various iPads right here. And if you change any one of them, doesn't matter which one, let's say I change this guy right here. I just want to show you, I'm going to change iPad copy 3. And what should we do with it? I'm just gonna, for a second here, I'm just gonna turn off that galaxy layer right there. Did you see that? Now I'll just close it. I'll just say I'm gonna close instead of save, and I will save though. I'll click yes to update as I close, and that would be a save button on the Mac, by the way. I think it's pretty obvious, but this is it now. This is before with its galaxy, and this is after without its galaxy. Now I do want its galaxy, so I'm gonna undo that modification, but I just want you to see that it's all there. It's just any one of these, they're all linked to the same original. Let's say I grab these guys and delete them. I just want to show you something. And now I'll have just iPad copy 3 selected here, and I'll press Master Fist T again in order to make a copy of it, and that messed things up. So be very careful, won't you? Because that did not. I'm really surprised that didn't work. But that is the advantage, I would say, by the way, of knowing your numerical transformation values. And so if this happens to you, I guess it's actually great that it happened to me, because I want to show you what you do. If you kept track of those transformation values, then what you do is you just run through the same steps. So Control J, Command J on the Mac in order to create a duplicate of this guy. Right click and choose Rasterize Smart Object. And notice it's rasterized right now. It doesn't have that little page icon right there. And if you hover over it, it just says Layer Thumbnail. It doesn't say Smart Object Thumbnail. And now you can press Control-Alt-T is what you're going to have to do. Command-Option-T on the Mac. And then just go ahead and enter those values again. 400 is what it was for X. -190 for Y. And then 62 is what I came up with for... but that isn't going to work, is it? Because that's relative now to that last iPad. So what do you do? Well, I think this video has turned into a very rich video full of information about what you do if you run into a problem like this. So I'm just going to select all these layers now. They're all gone. And you may be like, well, Deke, what about your mask? Yeah, let's hold on to that mask, actually. We don't want to lose that. So I'll just turn this guy off. We'll start with the original iPad because those values only work for the original one. And now I'll press Control-J in order to jump it. I'll right-click and choose Rasterize Smart Object. I'll press Control-Alt-T, Command-Option-T on the Mac in order to do the duplicate thing, and I'll change these values right here: 400, -190 for Y, and 62 exactly for X and H. Press the Enter key a couple times to accept that change. Undo. No, don't undo. I'm sorry. Leave it. Don't undo that, actually. You want that information to stay there because sometimes Photoshop will forget. Get rid of those two layers. Just get rid of them. And now let's mash your fist T. Let's see if this works. I'm like knocking on wood all over the place here. I don't need to though, because I knew this would work just fine. But I did a Control Shift Alt T, Command Shift Option T on the Mac. Now I'll grab that mask right there, put it on there, get rid of the guy that was just holding the mask, and now I'll press Control Alt Shift Alt T. So mash your fist T a bunch of times. And you can go on and on and on if you want. You can go all the way from little cat A to little cat Z. And thanks to the fact that I'm working with the original Smart Object, each and every one of those cats without hats will update each and every time I make an edit. And so what do you think? Do you just love clones or do you hate them? Drop me a comment and let me know. And while you're at it, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And don't forget to turn this into this. Join me at patreon.com/DekeNow. And then go to Deke.com and sign up for my newsletter. I'm Deke McClellan. This is Deke Now.